CNT125, Chapter 9, our last chunk is on some policies for security. Again, most of our security breaches begin or are due to human error. So we need to have some policies in place to let people know what are you allowed to do, what are you not allowed to do, what are you supposed to do, what are you not supposed to do, that sort of thing. And that's where the security policies come in. So the security policy is just that. We need to identify risks, who's allowed to do what, who's part of what team, and what, and what are the team members' jobs in different events. So how do we deal with these kind of things? Let's take a look. Security policy goals, there's a whole bunch of them here, but it basically has to do with making sure only authorized users have access, preventing unauthorized users, protecting our data, preventing accidental hardware or software damage. So again, somebody logging in only has access to what they're supposed to. Preventing intentional damage. Create an environment where our network and systems can withstand a threat and recover. So having some redundancy, some backup, that if something is compromised, there's other things in place that are going to keep the thing running until a repair can truly be done. Communicating the employee's responsibility, the users in the network, as well as the IT team, and making sure the employees are aware of all of this. They're being monitored. They're made aware of all that, and reminding them periodically, maybe yearly, of like, hey, review this policy, make sure make sure you're doing X, Y, and Z and not doing A, B, C kind of thing. That's all part of this too. So strategy is you do need to form a team, a committee, and you need members from different parts of the company, getting their input as well as communicating. Okay, I need to know what you guys need so we can develop plans. Then I also need you to know this, and that's all part of this. Doing your posture assessment, looking at the severity and likelihood of each threat, and what are we changing to minimize the risks here, and then assigning people responsibility for, hey, when this happens you're going to do A, B, and C, when this happens you're going to do D, E, and F kind of thing. What is going to happen in all this? Now, bring your own device has caused some challenges in all of this. Once upon a time, the only technology in a network was technology bought by said company or school, if you will. Nowadays, many people bring their own devices. We'll just start with BYOD, bring your own device. Many people bring their own smartphone or maybe even their laptop onto the network. So what are they allowed to have access to? In some places, that's not acceptable. That's too much of a security risk. Other places, fine, but when you log in, you only have access to, the internet, or limited access to the internet. Okay, and that's the reason for this. So you might have varying states of bring your own device, bring your own application. Hey, I have my own blah on my own device. Bring your own cloud. I can have access to my own cloud storage. Bring my own technology, and this is the I can bring my smartphone, I can bring my laptop kind of thing. Choose your own device. In some cases, I'm actually able to say, hey, I want this laptop instead of this desktop kind of thing. So there's all kinds of varying levels of this. Now, as the IT team on the back end, your support for these changes. What do I need to do to support this? What do I need to do to quarantine these different types of devices on my network? We need to detail out what is allowed, what isn't, and again, what do they have access to? That's kind of what I was saying on the last slide over there. What do they have access to? What are they allowed to do? What are they not allowed to do? Maybe quarantine them off in their own subnet, their own VLAN, give them a path to the internet with blah, 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 but I'm going to limit out all the other traffic. Okay, this all needs to be figured out, and what's allowed, what's not. Now, in some companies, you might even have if people are allowed to use mobile devices, you might even need to have mobile device management on this. Some sort of software installed that can allow people on the network and use it, and off the network when they're done. And you might actually have them install a little application. I think they show this over here later. They might talk about that later. Where it's going to limit what they can and can't do. So with your mobile device management, software works works with common mobile platforms, can add and remove devices remotely. Here's a couple examples of them. And this might actually automate enrolling them, forcing them to use certain passwords, encrypting, and it might even in some cases help with wiping the device in case it were to be stolen. Because again, I might use a smartphone for a lot of my business, so I might have a lot of transactions back and forth with account numbers and so forth. If that smartphone is lost or stolen, we need a way to be able to secure that, wipe that clean, that data cannot be pulled off and used against our company. So that needs to be part of a policy and/or process for a company. Acceptable use policy, you need to let employees know what's acceptable, what's not, and any penalties for such violations. And I remind, actually here's some restrictions. Don't do anything illegal, don't try to circumvent this, don't try to market products, don't forward spam email, don't violate the person in the organization, copyrights, don't export software, don't download malware, those kind of things. Always sign off. Always use company resource to fill your job. Don't do any of your personal stuff. Be aware activities in the network can be monitored. Immediately report anything that's weird or odd. Okay, that's all part of an acceptable use policy. Hack has one for you. If you log under My Hack over in the side over here, there's a student handbook. It actually lists it for you. You go to usually around 30 to 40 ballpark. There's a computer use and security internet access policy. It tells you what you're allowed and not allowed to do. That actually applies for you and it actually applies for me too. What am I allowed to do with hacks networks? I mention this because as a student, that's what you're allowed and not allowed to do. Eventually down the road where you work, you'll have the same kind of thing. It might be more restrictive. And eventually down the road, if you're on the IT team, you might be on the other side of the table of helping to write this. What are people allowed to do and not allowed to do on the company network? Non-disclosure agreements. This might be necessary in some cases to let people realize what's confidential and what you're allowed to talk about, what you're not allowed to talk about. You might actually have to sign something like this to say, hey, any confidential information, I'm going to leave it where it is. I'm not going to discuss this with anybody else. That could be people's personal information, could also be financial information for the company, etc. NDA, I might actually have to deal with a non-disclosure agreement for certain places that you work. Password policies. Password policy, that is a piece of the puzzle. Having people have a secure password makes it much more difficult for people to compromise their account. It's inexpensive, it's easy to do, but it is a challenge for users. So you need to communicate them what's acceptable and stress to them, hey, this is part of a bigger puzzle here, bigger plan to try to help secure the data on the network. So I do need to make sure my default passwords are being changed on router switches, etc. I need to make sure people are not using familiar information. I need to make sure people are not using words that appear in the dictionary because that's vulnerable to dictionary attack. Hacker can load a whole dictionary into a program and then turn around and have it use those words to try to log in. Just go through the whole dictionary and try to use every word in there to log into something. It's relatively easy to do. So I need to let people know, all right, we got to use long passwords, and we tell them how many characters long. And I used kind of a sample here, building one, saying, okay, we need to use combinations of letters. All right, so they took the S's and made them 5s, uppercase and lowercase. So now we have a capital P and a capital D in there. Yay! Add a special character. Now we have the ampersand in there. Do not repeat a word or number sequence. So I don't go 5-5 or I don't go happy kind of thing. I don't use a single letter, symbol, or character more than twice in succession. So now we have 5S instead of 5-5. And don't use easily recognizable phrases such as a line of poem, famous song, etc. So I took just the generic word password, and as you see here, it's not really a good password anymore, but you can see it has progressed. That's a heck of a lot more difficult to try to hack at this point than we started off with, and that's the whole point of a password policy. You need to let people know what is acceptable for them, what they should be doing. That is all part of a password policy. We also tell them make sure they don't write it down. Oh, people are going to write passwords down on Post-it notes. It's going to happen. But you need to let them communicate to them that's not acceptable. It's going to change frequently. We're going to make sure they can't reuse passwords after they've expired. And I should be using different passwords for different applications. And I might need to be using a program that's going to help me with this. Okay, so I need to communicate all this to users. And I remind you, this is a server login. This is Windows. I guess this is around early mid 2000s server. And here I just show you when you create a username and password for somebody. There's an actual settings here on password must be changed, cannot use, blah blah blah, never expires. There's settings in here that I can dictate how that password must appear for the user. We need to make sure it's strong, but I need to make sure it's not too ridiculous, because as soon as we make these password policies too ridiculous, they're going to write them down on Post-it notes and post them on their monitor under their keyboard. I threw this in here for fun. Here's the 2018 top. I just took the top 10 passwords that are being used. 1, 2, 3, 5, 6. Okay, we made it require 8 characters. 1, 2, 5, 6, 7, 8. And here's all the ones. Here's the sunshine. Here's QWERTY. Here's the top of your keyboard. Okay, this is what people are going to use unless we dictate something else. Privileged user agreement. This is your admin account, making sure it's communicated to anybody on the IT team what is acceptable, what is not, guidelines, restrictions, that sort of thing, letting them know, hey, if you have access with this account, here's what is allowed, here's what's not. And then also anti-malware. We talked about anti-malware or malware before, and anti-malware software, what your anti-malware policy is, how we deal with these things, you know, letting people know, hey, we're not going to let you use flash drives in here, here's the reason why, that sort of thing. That's all part of your anti-malware policy. And that is, I should say, they throw a couple other things here with you. Computer encrypted malware should be cleaning regularly, updating regularly. We should not be allowed people to disable their software. What do the users do if they do note a malware pop up on their system? There should be a team of people that handles that to deal with it. Making sure people don't install any authorized software on their system, games, etc. And then how are we going to let people know there is a malware that we need to deal with or be aware of, don't download this file, etc. So that all needs to be part of your anti-malware policy too, communicating all this to users, communicating all this to the users in the network. And that is the last topic of Chapter 9.